The Endurance Asia podcast.
And always tell a truthful story if they ever ask. Stop the complaining cause things ain't that bad.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Hey, Arseny, welcome to the Endurance Asia podcast.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to have you on. We've kind of wanted to have someone with a nutrition background on the podcast for a while. And yeah, you were recommended by a guy I know, Dan, and he said, "Oh, you got to get Arseny on. I think he would be like a really good addition to the podcast." And then when I started researching you, I was like, "You're a legit endurance athlete as well. You consult and advise on nutrition for endurance sports, and you've got a technology company talking about nutrition." So I was like, "Okay, got to reach out to you, sir." So yeah, like with that, like it'd be good to give us a bit of a background and the audience a bit of a background of like how you got into nutrition, how you got here in Asia, and how you got into endurance sports.
Yeah, it's all very well interconnected, and I got into Asia about 10 years ago. I moved. This is the second place where I live permanently. I travel around, and I used to travel around, but like I only moved once. And immediately, pretty much after I moved, I started gaining weight because I couldn't understand like the completely different nutrition pattern. Like the food availability is different, the social, the cultural impact, and just the food choices in the food courts and everywhere. And I gained a lot of.
Where did you move from? To?
I was born in Russia, and I lived in St. Petersburg all these years. And around 10 years ago, I moved to Singapore, and like it was in the middle of a minus 25 Celsius winter. Then I moved here. It was like plus 30, so 50 degrees. Wow. So it's like completely reshaped me in terms of I did a lot of mistakes. And I was already quite a beast back then. I used to be a good runner in my kind of like uni days, but then work, career, whatnot, I was like a beast. And then I got into 110 kg category, and I'm 186. That was bad. And then I figured like I'm doing something wrong, and I started kind of like backtracking already here in Singapore. And then it was like
Sorry, you got up to 110 kg. How tall are you?
186.
Okay, wow.
So it was like BMI 30 a lot.
And were you like Arnold Schwarzenegger?
I was like, no, it was just like fat. Flat out fat, my friend. No, it's like flat out flabs. Yeah, and I then started to kind of figure what am I doing wrong, but then it was like more about hear and say. I was listening to a lot of people's advices, which in retrospect I realized like do not apply. A lot of things that we read on Facebook or we hear from our mates, they're usually like just reading it up or hearing it up from someone else, and origin could be a complete BS actually. So, and then slowly, like I got through like a personal crisis that I think along my a lot of connections in endurance sports sometimes like is the most common trigger to get into like ultras or marathons. And I got into marathons, then triathlons, full Ironman, then ultra distances. Self-support and endurance bike rides. So I want to just if you don't mind, I'll give a quick shout out to people that impressed and mentored me. So huge thank you to Andre Bloomberg, the founder of Hong Kong 4 Ultra Trails Challenge, and big shout out to my mentor in nutrition, Matt Fitzgerald, whom like books I read and we met in California several times, and also to my team. So I'm on the integrated riding racing team. And it was like a village of coaches that helped me get through my endurance upbringing. And these are the kind of fundamental guys that impacted my kind of
How do you
career.
know Andre? I didn't realize you knew him.
I was just introduced through a common connection, and I was just preparing for my first 100K, not even 100 miler, and we talked, and he just went right into it and advised me a lot of things, and I'm very thankful for him. So he's a superstar and very impressive leader, and like people follow him and like
mate, the godfather of trail running and
bonded,
Hong Kong.
sure.
Top bloke.
Stellar inspiration.
Yeah, and you say what was it that you were running from? What was it that drove your movement?
It was just I was going through like a personal event. Yeah, I guess you're asking. Yeah. So I was. It's a common pattern. Like my case was divorce and separation from my 6-year-old daughter. Yeah. And she moved back to Russia. We now are very well connected, so it's all reestablished. But back then it was like either I go drink a lot and consume a lot of unhealthy food, and then probably I will end up even worse. Or I do set myself a goal, and I wish everyone sets themselves up to something and then work backwards. This is the only working pattern.
I mean, it's fascinating you say that, because a lot of people talk about endurance sports as being like addictive. They are like it is almost like a drug, you know, when you think about the dopamine effect of it, when you think about all of the actual hormones that it influences within your body. And I suppose it's just a certainly better drug for you than alcohol.
It is.
And so how long did it take you from to drop from 110 kg now? What are you sitting at now?
So I'm right now 82.9, which doesn't impress me because I have to do the functional threshold power test for my race team. We have a very strict rule of the of watts per kilogram. My ideal race weight was maybe about 79. So I'm about maybe like 3 above. But that's about a good 30 kg. So I'm down from there, and it's also a huge testimony to nutrition, not only just to physical exercise, but this is what brought me to the kind of nutrition studies. And I've done a formal specialist diploma in nutrition science here in Singapore. I invested like a year of proper study. So I had a lab coat and I measured protein content in food and like the high performance laser chromatography for carbohydrates and for lipids. It was weird here in NYP in Singapore. Right. After work, like just jump on a cab and go study like till 9:30 in the labs. It was pretty phenomenal. So one of the nutrition tweaks that changed a lot on me was when I met my wife to be. So my partner Lily, we run the food blog Food Buddy on Instagram. You've probably seen we have like 14,000 followers. This is our main channel. So she actually tweaked. She had a tear in her neck disc. And she was going through quite a bit of like struggle with that, and we tweaked her nutrition along with mine, and we set up on the very healthy, lean forward kind of like course of just natural nutritional choices to reduce weight, to make sure that there's enough minerals, enough vitamins in our diet, in our nutritional choices in our family. And she healed herself pretty much through light exercises and food. And we didn't do any surgery, and she's doing duathlons now, so she's okay. Wow.
Yeah. Okay, and so when you decided to sort of what was the first thing you signed up for as like an endurance event? Was it 100K?
It was a Stand Chart marathon. So before that was like 10K runs. Yeah. And I didn't do any halves. I'm like, okay, I'll just do a marathon, whatever. Yeah. And I think this decision was severely influenced by tequila shots, as usual. So.
The worst decisions are always made on tequila. But that was like the start, and then you started training for that and realized how important nutrition would be to sort of drop
later
the weight
on.
as well.
Actually, later on. So I first done marathon, and when I did Stand Chart, I was about 90 kg. It was like a 4-hour 4 on the dot or something, like 4:01. Marathon. But then I was doing prep for I've done a bike ride in Melbourne. There is this Great Ocean Road Gran Fondo called Amy's Gran Fondo. So I've done that, and I think I realized how nutrition is important when Aussie grannies, I blame them. Aussie grannies, if you're there listening to me, I love you. So the story goes, there were a couple of grannies in the category 65 plus that were overtaking me on a very long climb from the Great Ocean Roads upward into northbound kind of like plateau. It was like a 5K long climb, really steep long climb, and there were 2 grannies like in their cool bikes chatting, bantering, and they actually, their age group started 35 minutes after my wave. Right. So they caught up 40K into the race. They caught up this 35 minutes, and they were easily overtaking me through the banter uphill, and I'm like, training is not enough. Like Grannies definitely know something. And then I'm like, if training is not enough, then what? Then nutrition. So that's how it rolled up. And then I did like a half Ironman. And since then I did 6 full Ironmans. My personal best is in Cairns. In 2017, I did a 10:38 or 10:39.
Wow, that's impressive. And so you've done 6, so like mainly around Australia, have you done?
Mainly in Australia. Shout out to these volunteers supporting Aussie Ironman events. Thank you guys, you're doing it great. It's really cool events.
I know a few of the people that work in the team down there, and it's they do a really good job. So you've done like Busselton and
Basso, Cairns. These are kind of my alternating 2 choices, but I'll probably settle in for Cairns. It's one of the most scenic. It's considered, I think, top 5 or something like top 10 Ironmans in the world. It's one of the scenic most Ironmans, and very, very, very well supported. Like a lot of cheerful Queensland people, and just pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
Do that.
Yeah, very good. And so what's your kind of philosophy on nutrition, and how has it changed from when you started focusing on it through like going through years of study through it, and now are obviously running a business around it? Like how has your philosophy on nutrition evolved during that time?
Well, first I understood that there's no golden kind of like silver bullet or like one gold standard like that applies to everybody. And I think everyone should just realize that by eating a supplement or altering the diet to something, you will probably not perform better. You will change something in your body, but it all comes in a massive combination of your training, your nutrition, your sleep, and your social life, and just like how moral is developed inside of you, like how you actually drag yourself out to do the 4 previously mentioned things.
Yeah.
So that thing is fundamentally what I kind of teach in my workshops and one-on-one to my mentees. I'm trying to pass like, hey, it's all in you. We were hunters hundreds, like thousands of years, tens of thousands of years ago. We were running around without nutrition for a couple of days, and it was okay. But at the same time, we would then kill like a big animal and eat it, and then we will also be okay. So we are we are survivors. Like we can do really crazy stuff. That is a testimony to what 166K runs are doing to us. What I learned though is like it's all about very individual choices. Lots of the things would need to be just resonated against your biochemical like blood test, like as easy as that. Like what's your cholesterol level, like what are the deficiencies that a clinical test of your blood will show. Like starting point is always like a nutritional needs assessment. You don't just jump into conclusions. You really need to understand whether like you have enough protein because your skin is like peeling or not peeling, your hair is falling or not falling, like whether you have this or that. You need to have a proper assessment of where you live, where is your lunch place nearby the work, what is available, what is not available in shops. Back to my example, when I moved to Singapore, it was like a completely different world of like shopping. 10 years ago, Singapore didn't have all the variety of retail stores that we had for like European meals, right? Oatmeal was like very seldom found, so something like that. So, and among these kind of assessment things, individually, you figure out, back to the discussion of goals, what are you trying to achieve? So if you want to sustain your weight, because sometimes people train a lot, but they are not losing weight, right? So that's something of a mistake or not. Or you're trying to reduce your weight because you probably are in the obese category, or you're trying to recover faster, or just you need some coaching in terms of moderation because you're sometimes impacted by your social life, and like you need to just understand what is available and how to see the patterns of the food choices in the menu that will not affect your training, and you will not feel guilty for that. And it's very individual. It doesn't take long. We're not speaking about the level of Eliud Kipchoge, who is like with his carbohydrate gel. What's that brand that he used in this Morton? So the new gel, the 80 grams of carbohydrates that's pulled into you. Or we're not speaking the ultra performance.
What's the maximum amount that you can intake within an hour? I think
This is what they do. They tweak it like so that your intestine, with the pH level in your stomach, basically your intestine converts the bacteria and pH level in your stomach, allows the drinkable, the fluid state carbohydrate drink to be converted into something called like a gel, and it basically goes through the intestine wall faster. There were some control studies that put it into debate. Like actually, some studies suggested like it doesn't actually work, but clearly it works for Kipchoge. This is like an extreme level. Or another extreme level, we're talking about like Chris Froome. In Giro d'Italia, when he was on the 5-day pattern of reducing his body weight, so that when it comes to stages with a lot of climbs, he has an advantage uphill, because like every day he recovers. Power to weight ratio is enhanced. So like on the flats, on the team trial, on the first couple of days, he's smashing it, and then like when it comes to climbing, he's able to recover daily, but at the same time reduces the body weight. And they reduced him by I think like a kilo or like half a kilo. I don't remember exactly, but like through the 5-day reduce half a kilo over for a professional athlete. That's a lot of nutritional tweaks. And he was eating all these Haribo gummies and like candies as a recovery. So we're not talking that, right? We're talking just like general pattern of like what's good for you and working backwards. Because these extreme levels, they are very aspirational, but in reality, people,
they don't fit for the normal human being.
I
say we're all normal.
We're all normal, yeah.
Yeah, we're all 99.9% genetically the same, but essentially when you're an elite athlete, it's
a
just
total different ballpark.
It's such fine tuning when it comes to diet, nutrition, and everything. And
another example about survival, there's this channel called Vice on YouTube, and if you go there and find, there's like a video that they published couple of weeks ago or a week ago, a guy was eating macaroni and cheese for 17 years. He's still alive. He doesn't look fit. Like he doesn't look like he's gonna run like a 5K on any kind of split. Like he will probably do that, but like he has some disease, like some order disease, that when he eats something that is not mac and cheese, he just like wants to vomit. Like it's a different altogether level. So we're talking about tweaking the endurance in a regular human being, not like Froome level and whatnot. I'm not specializing in this high end, top notch.
And I suppose my biggest takeaway from what you've just said then is that we are all different, and there's no like perfect diet for everyone.
Individual.
And so you're, I suppose, from what I was taking about, one of your like best recommendations initially is to do blood work and to find out where you are in terms of your blood lipid profile. Like what are the other main sort of factors that you would be looking for on like testing to find where?
Well, what's your oral, like what's OGTT? I always recommend doing the oral glucose tolerance test. So whether you have any marker for diabetes, I mean, by any DNA legacy or something like that, or just like you take too much sugar and your blood sugar levels are already good. Already going high. So doing this too is something that I always recommend to my mentees. And then, I mean, I'm speaking
How's
about
that test conducted? So you just take a blood glucose level
every I think quarter hour. So you're basically taking blood, and that's before you take a very condensed juice. Orange juice with a lot of sugar, and then every quarter hour they draw a curve how fast your insulin response allows you to kind of convert the glucose into glycogen. So that's your glucose tolerance test, OGTT. So I highly recommend doing that, and just look at the blood profile first thing first, like, and then what's available. Getting back to like where you are, what's in the living range. Like you don't have to travel 20 miles to buy something, you need to understand what's available in your surrounding and then match it against the goals. This is the kind of approach that I've taken, and it worked for me. It works pretty much for any mentee. So I have people that lost like 10 kg in 2 months just by thinking about the system of variables around them and tweaking it to the regular different process.
So where do you sit on really like counting macros, like protein, carbohydrate, and fats, compared to like looking at overall sort of calories in, calories out? Like, is there where do you sit on that sort of dichotomy?
It's a good question. So I take the foundation approach. So I take a look at the estimated energy requirements, and again, that is either an equilibrium to maintain the weight or a pattern to reduce if you want to lose weight. And we're talking about athletes, aspired athletes want to perform either faster or just not fail, like not DNF. So usually it's like about the weight reduction. And then from the estimated energy requirement, you're able to derive like what is it, your kind of carbohydrate intake a day, your protein intake a day, and your like fat intake a day. You can derive it from there. This is a scientific approach. Yeah. Another approach that I follow personally is like an overlay of 7 days.
So just to interject on that one, I think for most people, like, and a lot of our listeners to the podcast, and a lot of people we have on are amateur athletes, and they've got job, wife, kids, like, and
same me.
and being that, and then like they get their training in where they can, and actually calculating exactly the energy that they do, like how much energy they need for it, and then calculating the macros and being able to sort of check for each meal, being able to like weighing stuff.
That's like no. That's too complicated. That doesn't work. So like the second part, you're right. So the second part is like once you know your ER. You're basically getting
being energy
estimated. It's a term. It's an estimated energy requirement, which is the physical activity level that you can get from your Strava. We like all these trackers. They estimate yours, and then I said like overlay 7 days. Your last 7 day sliding window is always applicable. So if you're not exercising a lot, then reduce it. So the physical activity level, the basal metabolism, and also the thermic effect of food, which is another like about 10-15% that people actually forget about.
So let me just break that down quickly. So you've got the predicted amount of EER, which is based upon your last 7 days worth of training. Then you've got your basic metabolic level,
let's do that. So you go, hey, everybody open up their browsers, go Google for EER online calculators, and then they will take basically your age, height, weight, and your physical activity level, if I'm not mistaken, which is like 4 categories, like sedentary to like extreme. So I recommend, and that already EER includes the physical activity level, the BMR for the age, weight, and height and whatnot, and the thermic effect of food. So thermic effect of food is like, people forget that 15% of our daily calories intake is used to process the food that we take. And it's like, if you think about a 2000 calories diet, it's like 300 calories a day. It's like, don't forget about it. It's a TEF, right?
And that's just your body metabolizing
what you metabolize the food. Like flat out, just food conversion takes like body by body 15% of food. So anyways, so the physical activity level in that formula on the EER, I suggest that you look at your 7 days back of training and then you average on it. It's like one of the easiest way to approach it. The reason being is like you're not responding to a gap in a day or two. Like if you're tapering before the race, even if you're tapering, it takes you like 2 days. So you take an average and then you add to like a sedentary or a mild active, even if you're training like my teammates on IRT and myself, like 12, 15 hours a week, squeezing it between the kid and the wife that you mentioned and like the work, you can still do it. There are ways to do it. There are books about it. So even if you're training that high or not training that high, Strava, it will show you like what is your average ride, what is your daily kind of like calorie, and then you can derive what's your weekly calorie physical activity level. So you add it on top of the EER, and this is your kind of average target. And then you can derive, we're blessed in Asia. It's not bad at all in Asia. Singapore is very strict on the nutrition information panels. Australia is just through the roof developed. It's one of the most developed nutrition information panels regulation. Everything we see is well measured. We can derive what's available. Again, like you get, the second step is get bored, like flat out bored. To be successful, diet is like what is needed, like ER. Second one, how do I achieve it? And getting bored is like what is an outcome of the nutrition assessment, where your office is, what's your predominant lunch places, what are the food choices on that menu, what can you do. I ran a survey in my Instagram, and about 400 athletes, quite inspiring athletes around the world, they responded that 35% of times they eat the same food over the week. 35% out of this 400 people responded that they eat 5 or 6 times the same choice for a given for a given meal. So that's just getting bored equals getting successful.
Yeah,
so
that's actually really interesting, and I think taking decisions out of our day-to-day life, whether it be what you're going to wear in the day, whether it's what you're going to eat, the time you're going to eat, all that, taking those decisions out makes having less decisions to make.
Because hunger versus appetite, it's in the end, you're trying to battle as much as possible, you're trying to battle the appetite. You want to make sure that you address the hunger. That's why you never skip breakfast. Breakfast keeps you going, right? Do you skip breakfast?
Every day.
You skip breakfast.
Every day.
Try not skipping the breakfast. I'll talk to you later.
And I'm interested in the debate on this, because I'll give you my philosophy around it. So I believe in time restricted eating and eating within a specific window. I also believe when it comes to endurance sports, becoming fat adapted is really, really important.
Okay.
And so I find that training in the morning, I'll always run to work, so I always train fasted in the morning.
Oh, it's a good protocol. You're following it, particularly you're following the so-called it's called the morning low protocol. So you still have to take a break after that to replenish, because you're using up running to job or doing some morning exercise. You still need to have a break afterwards. I also ride LH5s. I ride with the guys Sentosa Wednesdays, whatnot. We ride a lot, and in Singapore you can only exercise at 5 a.m. right? So I genuinely believe that for successful 10 plus hours training, skipping breakfast is not a good idea, because you will then get hungry by lunchtime. And lunchtime is when you really want to get bored and not do any mistakes, especially in our busy life. So one of the reasons, again, I'm not talking about the athletes that work from home and they live somewhere in the suburbs of Sydney. Hey guys, Macars Creek, I love it. So you have a lot of followers in Sydney, I guess, right? So
we've got a few,
so cool. If you're living suburbs somewhere in not Singapore downtown kind of working conditions, when you work from home 5 days a week or 4 days a week, it's totally different. But in Singapore or downtown office life, where you're rocking up, your lunch would be as light as possible and as boring as possible, and that's only possible if you loaded your decent amount of good, healthy amount of energy through the brekkie. Then you have a snack in the afternoon, and that snack is a handful of nuts. Portions aside, one of the things that you can also take a look at the diet of thinking about portions. This is what Matt Fitzgerald is advocating for. This is what my when I launched an app, this is what my premise was, count portions. Portion of a fruit or portion of a nut in maybe 3 to 5 p.m. as a good snack. Apple has a highest among the fruits, highest satiety index. There's the satiety index that basically equals.
And satiety just making you feel full.
It's a product. Satiety fights the appetite by addressing the hunger, and you address the hunger by figuring out the fiber content in food. So satiety is measured by equal amount of calories per 100 grams, but there is a controlled study where people are not eating after 20 minutes, 30 minutes or 40 minutes. So
interestingly though, if you have apple juice, it doesn't, you take the fiber out, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So the white bread in satiety index, the white bread is the canonical 100%. So apple actually shoots at about 138%. So it's actually more filling at the same amount of calories. It's more filling than a loaf of white bread. And say handful of peanuts actually is lower than white bread. It's actually there's some, I don't remember the name of that enzyme that has it, but it provokes more eating. And the lowest is brownie because of the dopamine level. It's pure sugar, dopamine level up, and you want. So basically, having a snack with almonds or apples are the best. Having a snack 3 to 5. And then you have a either evening exercise, therefore like you tweak your, it's very individual, you tweak your evening supper, right? So dinner, like whatnot. Or if you're lean on the training that day, just cruising along, and you always go bored for lunch. That's why brekkie helps you. You really want to make sure that, okay, this is my brekkie choice 3 times a week. I'll have that in the fridge. I'll take it to work sometimes, and lunch should be bored, but you will have all these occasions where you have social team lunches, whatnot. So you need to always kind of factor in some buffer. And this is where like I never count up to like, this is not possible, this is not doable. Feeling guilty is bad. Like if you, the thing is like, if you've done something outside of your regular pattern, just exercise more or reduce the next day. But the fundamental goal is like never to skip a brekkie, get stupid bored, like really reduce the choices, and always snack at like 3 to 5, like apples, nuts.
Yeah, no, that's it seems like a really strong framework. I mean, I just personally, I find that having that eating window, like I have lunch and then we'll have like a snack in the afternoon, often nuts, and then have like an evening meal. And I just, I've got a fridge in the office, so I get a delivery of salad, and I make myself a massive salad, but just like drowned in olive oil, but just like loads of fresh veg basically, and then some cheese in it, some maybe a tuna or something along those lines. But one thing I do is like, I don't, because it's quite satiating, but I'll eat basically as I don't really count it. I just eat until I'm no longer hungry, really.
That's like, this is the pattern that like, and there will be no kind of ways to measure things for the next, I guess, like 100 years. The tests that I've done, like the probes, you know, like the dream of our like amateur athletes is like to have something like a pen, and then you stick it into the food and it gives you like, okay, this is like that many calories. There will not happen for the next 50 or even maybe like 100 years. There's no sensor like that even in design. It's just not possible, because fundamentally to measure for different contents like of protein and carbohydrates, different protocols, like you cannot do that in one device. Not possible. But you can train yourself, do the combinatory counting. Combinations of get to the problem of getting, not to the problem, to the solution of why getting bored is the way to do. Because you can combine, like mentally just count things up once, like what is your salad that you repeat 5 times a week? What is it worth in like...
And then you know exactly what it is.
And combinatory tracking is a different approach to measurements, because what you see, like the nutrition information panel is a very expensive thing. You need to send the food to the lab, and it's like it's expensive. But like you can combine things, you can just approximate plus minus blah blah blah. And this is what when you're setting up your nutrition plan and getting bored, you're basically narrowing the window of deviation. And then the another approach is that you can count portions. Like, you know that your salad is 1 portion of veg, 1 portion of nuts, 1 portion of oil, and portion wise you can stack the portions in a particular decreasing amount per week, and you can then count portion. This is Matt Fitzgerald's original idea.
Who's Matt Fitzgerald?
Matt Fitzgerald, he's the author of 80-20 running.
I've read this book. It's great.
80-20 running, the nutrition, endurance diet. Really cool guy. Like he lives in Pleasanton in California. Really cool.
80-20 running is great book.
Actually that is the book that inspired me to keep on to just go deeper in that. And I reached out to Matt, we talked, and him and I we talked a lot. He's really great. I think he's now training in some high altitude camp, if I'm not mistaken. He moved to Colorado, I might be wrong. I don't know.
Interesting. We'll check it. So
Matt, where are you?
How do you compare nutrition plans for the different types of endurance sports? So, I mean, we've covered a lot of endurance athletes, ranging from ultramarathon to like long distance cyclists or like sportives, to adventure racers, to marathon or then into Ironman as well, like yourself. So, how do you just like lump endurance athletes all into the same kind of camp when it comes to nutrition plans for them, or do you have to tweak depending on the discipline?
I think the common denominator is gravity. We're trying to fight gravity. We're not sumoists. We're not boxers in a weight category where impulse matters, right? So gravity can only be defined by mass, because gravity is like a constant thing, right? The mass of Earth doesn't change. So for you to bounce less up and actually propel yourself more forward, you need to make sure that your mass is lower. You cannot change the opponent's mass. It's a planet, right? So I guess fighting mass is only one way. I mean, it's just weight reduction. So there are many ways to achieve that, and many people, again, have different restrictions. Some religiously follow veganism. Some people, it's funny that like a lot of people that I talk to, they're like, oh, I watched this movie and I do the same thing. It's just like I eat eggs and I drink milk. And I'm like, well, kind of then you're not kind of vegan at all. You're like this scientific nomenclature name would be the ovo-lacto-vegetarian, and it's not very different from just eating habitually meat sometimes, So, I mean, it's some choices that people make for some reason. Some people are following a particular religious constraints, and they're like, I have a neighbor, by the way, like this is not to say anything bad, but like I have a family that are like strict vegans, and they're massively obese because they just use a lot of deep fried like veggies. And at the same time, I'm like, are you healthy? Or like, I'm not talking to them, but I know them, and I'm like, are they healthy or not? Like, what are they? So back to the mass problem, there are many ways to kind of attach to the dilemma of like reducing weight. There are multiple ways. Some come with some byproducts. Like I've researched the controlled studies on the low carb, for example. Like people like, and again, so summing up, all sports and endurance are about reducing weight, like weight reduction, and then being able to metabolize 200 whatnot calories an hour easily from gels. You can train yourself for that because your event lasts for like 10 plus hours. You need to make sure that you're like comfortable of eating your amount of calories an hour. So that's kind of summing it up. You can arrive at weight reduction from multiple ways. You can do keto, you can do low carb, high fat. Some of the researchers show that there is no particular endurance benefit in doing anything but like a regular World Health Organization recommended 55% of calories from carbs, 30% protein, and like the rest from fats. Some people prefer to do it because they believe in it and it helps them. Okay, like whatever works for you. I advocate for the carbohydrate rich in a balanced way, carbohydrate rich diet, just because I know it works, and I did try low carbs. Doesn't really like do a massive difference for me. And also there are controlled studies that show that LCHF, like it does improve the VO2, kind of the oxidative capacity that you can squeeze through your cardiovascular system and extract more from your slow twitch muscles. But at the same time, you can also up your VO2 max by doing interval training and doing the high intensity training intervals. Like it's equilibrium, right? You have multiple ways.
There's a few different ways to skin a cat, right? Of being able to improve overall performance. I think my biggest takeaway from what you're saying there is if you're doing endurance sports, reducing weight and increasing your power to weight ratio is going to help you no matter what. So like carrying any extra weight is only going to slow you down pretty much that's just the mass, the gravity, the very fundamental physics, and we all want to find like this silver bullet, but there's basically none. I mean, I've been and talked about it on the podcast quite a bit as well, and like Ben Pullum from Coached as well, and he's got he's a big advocate of the low carb, high fat nutrition plan.
Perfect.
And I before I met with Ben, I've known him for a couple of years now, but I think it's been about 2.5 years that I've been following loosely a low carb, high fat diet. I've lost loads of weight. Like I went from 94 kg down to I'm like kind of 78, 79 now. I'm sort of similar height to you. And it's something that I've been able to follow, so it's worked for me. Like I've been able to get getting bored. You know, I've had that simple, like, this is my diet for a week. I know what I'm going to eat, and I know how it affects my ketone levels. I know how it affects my ability to burn fat, and I've been able to sort of like kind of maintain that. The more research I do though, and actually the more like training I do and coming towards like races, knowing that you have to cycle in carbohydrates either. Yeah, if you're going to be doing a race and you're not having carbohydrates, then you're not going to be performing to your optimum.
The way it all boils down to is glycogen is the major form of actively available energy in us, right? So you can do on water and your own fats as long as you're conscious, but it will be slow.
Yeah, you need to maintain a lower heart rate to be able to do that.
Yeah, you're throwing in a word there called race, which is automatically meaning that your respiratory quotient, like what you're breathing, it will show that you will use glycogen anyway, because it's a race. You will have, even at the start line, you will have with your amount of cortisol through like just the excitement of like adrenaline levels around you, you will have a heart rate which is 10 bips higher than you anticipate a regular one. But back to the LCHF, actually one of the really cool guys that I follow, shout out to Jeff Rothschild. He was based in LA. He now moved to New Zealand doing his PhD there. So the recent paper that he's done and with a few other authors, it's about the dietary manipulations. And this is actually dietary manipulations concurrent to endurance training. Let me quote something here. So over the past 20 years, research suggests that strategically reducing carbohydrate availability during an athlete's training can modify the metabolic response. Several methods have been explored to manipulate carbohydrates availability, and they include low carb, high fat diet, right? Performing a 2-a-day training without glycogen restoration, right?
So or training fasting.
Train no restore.
So without
like
immediately eating.
You
afterwards.
just burned 2,000. We as humans, we have about 2,000 calories worth of glycogen when we are like fully loaded. Fully stocked.
And we can't store any more than that. Like
no, it's not possible. It's like liver. The glycogen stores is like battery cells. It's like most of it is in liver. Something in muscles, and a little bit in the blood. So like a 70 kg person would have about 450 grams of glycogen. So that's by
readily available.
Yeah, readily available. But by 4 is like 1,800 calories. So it's about 2,000 calories. You can easily burn like 2,000 calories by doing repeats on the bicycle. But basically, let me read that. I want to quote that. Arguments in favor of trying to increase fat burning capacity focus around the ability to utilize the large stores of lipids found even in a very lean athlete. So nice. Even a very lean athlete, you send him through the DEXA scan, very precise, 8% fat. I did DEXA scan last year. I was very lean. I was 11% fat. Nice. A lot of fuel, right? You think about it. But despite the theoretical advantage, measurable performance improvements from deliberately increasing fat burning capacity have been elusive. That's the paper. So again, here and say versus scholar.google.com. Like just have a habit of cross-checking on Scholar. Costs you nothing. Very good search engine that is just about the research, and it's all very, very fundamental, easily read. Each of these methods can confer beneficial metabolic adaptations for the endurance athlete during increases in mitochondrial enzyme activity and the rates of fat oxidation. However, the data showing a direct performance benefit is still very unclear. So again, controlled study, you have people doing low carb, high fat for the protocol of 3 weeks. You have people doing something, you have their sub-maximal performance against like a placebo or in a control study. Sub-maximal performance is the race performance, right? It's not your habitual way to reduce weight. I'm very supportive of LCHF and again, I'm just, it works, right?
Yeah, and this is not being dogmatic as well. I'm really interested in the debate about it because, the one thing we talked about there was race, okay? And when you consider a race, like if you're running a marathon race, then you're going to be averaging like a 155 to 160 say beats per minute like heart rate, and whereas that's why I was asking about the differing, like, because then if you're doing an Ironman, you're going to be slower and you're going to be going at lower heart rate.
No, guys, you will not be slower in an Ironman. If you're doing an Ironman, you keep on throwing your tailwinds and your gels, and you're just like
you maintain a lower heart rate than you would do at a marathon pace.
No, I mean it will be like you're gonna smash it. Again, back to the race thing. Define race. What's your result? If you really want to do something without training much, you can then biohack something. But if you really want to do a sub 10 Ironman, you gotta smash it. You gotta really throw in a lot of gels. You gotta throw in a lot of effort into it. And your heart rate, you don't even look at your heart rate. You look at when you're riding a 180k bike leg. You're looking at your watts. You want to sustain your watts, not your heart rate. You want to make sure that you're not making your legs tired because there is another 42k to run after the bike leg by sticking to your 210 or whatever 220 average of 30 seconds. That's how you run it. You don't look at the heart rate.
Yeah. So, but the reason I bring it up though is because there's a correlation between if you're an efficient fat burner, you can tell at the specific heart rate that you're more likely to be burning glycogen or fat.
That's the respiratory quotient. It shows you that, right? So that is a factor of many things. That includes your lungs, alveoli like percentage. How many alveoli that actually convert the air contains oxygen. Oxygen is only like 1/5 of what we inhale, right? 5-liter lungs, 1 liter of oxygen potential. But you cannot convert all of it because you don't have those alveoli in your lungs, right? So then you have your arteria, you have your heart. The heart itself is a muscle. It has the maximum stroke volume, and it plateaus at a certain heart rate. Yeah. So what you're referring to is like at which rate do you switch to glycogen consumption versus like respiratory quotient, right? So like what you exhale versus what you inhale shows the mixing of like the two types of fuels.
I mean, that's one way. Yeah, that's the way that you test for it.
And it's been around like for many years. You definitely want to mix in fat, but again, that implies that for the race, you already prepared yourself. You already have the maximum VO2 max that you could have achieved through your preparation. Like it's your A race, right? Once a year. You're preparing for that marathon for half a year, you want to lose it.
Yeah, I suppose what I'm getting at though is that my point for like, you're more likely to be burning a high level of glycogen at a marathon distance race than if you're doing an ultra marathon, 100 miler say, where you're going to be going at a much more reduced pace and more in a fat burning zone, where if you are better fat adapted, then you'll be able to there'll be less requirement to take on glycogen during the course of the race.
It's not. I think here is the amateur athlete's mistake. Effort is something that you set for yourself. If you want to run 100 miler and your muscles would not be destroyed, you can replenish protein through the duration of your 100 miler or multi-day run. If you want to run faster, you can run faster. There is no way that your effort is like you said it yourself, right? Your effort for the particular result in a particular race is what you said. In 100 miler or even longer, you still have your gels, your sachets of carbohydrates or whatever, or like the aid stations or backdrops. It's up to you to define what is your performance level for a particular distance. There is definitely any event has a matter of chance because of the weather, your morale, right? Because your lace, you caught some rock and you cut off your lace, and now your shoes just wobbling on your feet. Now, what do you do? Like, you can just start getting very disappointed, or you can fix it with something like, I don't know, a barbed wire. I don't know. But the point I'm making is like, it's up to you to define where are you pushing yourself. In the endurance race, you can always have a heart rate, like you can have a heart rate at zone 3 throughout an ultra. You will not die, or like zone 4 throughout an ultra. You will not die. And it's the same if you're running a marathon. You can run a marathon at zone 4 and you will run it at zone 3. It's the effort that you set to yourself. What is your goal? What do you want to push yourself into? And then the zones, you derive them and you simulate and you try out your strategies for a particular time result. If you just want to finish, it's one thing. If you want to do a best effort to your condition, it's second thing. If you want to beat last year's performance of a buddy who was joking at you over a Christmas party in your office, that's a third thing, right? So like you set yourself a particular condition and you train to that condition, which is like, okay, I want to smash it out of that. What do I need to do? It's like 8,000 meters elevation over that. Yeah, it's an 8,000 meter elevation in that 100 miler. So what do I need to do? I need to just train my calves. I need to train my shims. And then what is my nutrition strategy? Does it change if it was a flat one or not? It doesn't actually. Like whether you go uphill or downhill. It's just like you eat uphill.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And I suppose I'm going against that study where it's saying like becoming fat adapted is not, it's questionable whether like it allows people that improves performance at the highest level. I don't know, was that the faster study? No, sorry, this is the guy in New Zealand.
This is the dietary manipulations concurrent to endurance training. And
we'll put it into the show notes as well. But I suppose my point is that if you're doing much longer stuff, then having the ability to actually burn fat has got to be able to help you, because you don't necessarily need to take on as much glycogen. So it's one of the benefits of being able to be a better fat burner, better fat adapter.
Totally, it comes naturally with your VO2 max. The more you can pump through, like you develop the cardiovascular muscle. Don't think about nutrition alone. It's like you're training. So you develop your VO2 max, you go to the superior range of like 66 to 70 or to 72 or somewhere there. Your ability to pump up more oxygen will automatically mean that you will be able to extract more from the triglycerides stored in your muscle with that amount of oxygen available. It's like automatically. The way that you arrive at that VO2 max is through your planning of your preparation to the race. It's not really related to like, hey, let me drop carbs. It shows something could be achieved by tweaking the diet, going into like one of these protocols mentioned in this article that doesn't actually cancel your requirement to raise your VO2 max anyway. And your training about bumping VO2 max is interval training, hill repeats, like you know your drill, HIIT. That is what gets you up to the good age group max VO2.
Yeah. And so you've talked a little bit about gels and stuff. Like, what's your philosophy around race nutrition?
Have one. So there's a good amount of different products. You need to just make sure that you don't screw up in the race. So get yourself prepared. I also am a big believer in the race morning minute by minute kind of drill, so that you're starting up without, I call them passengers, basically. How do you call it, feces, right? So like, don't carry them around, right? So like all this kind of thing. So the nutrition in the race starts with the race morning, and I'm a very big believer on like a minute by minute protocol of like how you start your morning that day. So what would be your brekkie? How would you keep yourself like not hungry for at least like few 3-4 hours that go from your start line? What is your caffeine strategy like? So there are a lot of products. They all are different, and get yourself acquainted with them. Make sure that if it's an ultra distance or like anything that is closer to 10 hours or more would probably need a little bit of like a protein focus, because any day, regardless of your way to extract the protein, there are many ways. Vegan or vegetarian or whatnot, you need protein, right? So any day you need about a lot of protein. If you're running a day, you're running an ultra or like a consecutive days like the Hong Kong 4 ultra trails, you need a lot of protein still. So think about how you're going to eat that protein. In an ultra endurance world, this is like bars, like get yourself acquainted with the bars. They also add up. They need to have some carbohydrates for the food to stick. Like they are not just like chunk of soybean powder. You will not be able to consume it in the race. It'll be very demoralizing. But like, what's your protein choice? How are you going to mix it in? What are the times through the race that you will take it? What's your hydration strategy? Drink only by thirst. Avoid that hypernatremia, that dreadful sin of many amateur athletes that just stop by every aid station every like bloody 2 kilometers and have a gulp. So last year I was doing I was a nutrition coach for Stan Chart Marathon, and we did like 5 Facebook Lives, and most of the amateur runners, they were like, so I drink that, whatever was the sponsor back then, the sports drink. So think about it. Think about what will be the drinks in your if it's a supported race, what will be the drinks offered at aid stations, because you might end up topping up your glycogen stores as well by that product, or not, or it will be just water. So if it is just water, so think about that race in entirety versus your caloric, usually like about 200 calories an hour, 250 calories an hour caloric intake that you require for an endurance event, versus your strategy for the race morning, and have it like prescribed, rehearsed, checked, simulated. Do
it in training beforehand.
Simulate, like even for an ultra run, you have to do at least like a you don't necessarily do a simulator for like a 100 miler, but you would do maybe like 3 runs in 2 days, like a morning half mara, or like and then followed by an evening half mara, and then immediately after that another half mara, like 60k in like 18 hours or something, in 36 hours. So through that, try to use the same nutrition that you will use in the race. Get yourself acquainted. Caffeine, super important. Like prepare yourself, do the caffeine fasting the week before, even like 2 weeks before the race. There will be, I haven't heard about an ultra event that will have an espresso machine in it, so there will be no caffeine sources throughout. So like think about your pills, whether you will mix them with gels, whether you will have some other sources, I don't know. So think about caffeine, how it will keep you.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And the are there any kind of gels that you like, brands that you recommend that are
It was really good. It was really good time when maltodextrose gels were available, but they spoil fast. I think those were like Power Berries or something, fruit berry, from Power Bar.
Yeah.
They used to have those gels that were easily metabolized because they were really made of like dextrose, like from fruits, from fructose. But they didn't store well, so they actually bursted, like especially in heat if you don't store them in the fridge. So it was really dreadful. But for now, like I try to mix in, most of the gels that I buy are 0 caffeine with amino acids. So like I take some protein as a byproduct of my gel, and it still carries the good calorie content. If it is not I'm also now like I learned it from few guys, from few pros in Ironman. I think Brendan Curry mixes, like he's a crazy Kiwi. He mixes gels into water, if I'm not mistaken, or it was not Brendan Curry. So like we had this as the old world athlete, you have an access to the pre-race lunch with the pros, and I asked like who does what. And the guys basically, they mix in, when they start the race, they mix in the gels into their water bottles. So they basically always have on the frame on the bike and in the rear holder behind the saddle, they already have the pre-mixed content of like a super like concentration.
Like would they have like a bottle like purely as gels, or
no,
with
water,
yeah,
like
yeah.
six or eight gels per water bottle.
Yeah.
Or you can do there is a limit to what you can stir in. From the sachets, for example, you cannot basically, there is some level of at which sugar does not actually anymore like dissolve in the water. So you want to stick to that thickness and keep it as like your booster, and then take water by thirst from the aid stations. That's kind of how I follow that. So I mix in both gels and the sachets, and I start on the frame. There's like all the sachets already pre-stirred in my water bottle, in my front hydration system on the bike. So for the runs, you just carry sachets as much as you can because it's just weight.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a few things I'd like to dig into there. Actually, I'm a big fan of Tailwind. I don't know if you've ever used Tailwind
I'm
before.
a big fan of Tailwind as well.
Yeah, it's like just drinking your fuel, I think is really good. But it's also got all of the other nutrients like potassium, magnesium, and salt.
Yeah, it has minerals in it. Yeah, it's a good mix. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I still take pills. It's just never hurts to have more salt.
Yeah, you take salt. So this was another one that I wanted to touch on. So actually, a guy I know well. He works at Red Dot Running. A guy called Alvin Pung. He just recently ran the Craze Ultra. It's like a kind of road ultra around Singapore, the north of Singapore. Mm-hmm. And he came in second, and but then spent the next week in hospital with hyponatremia, and was completely knocked out. And
not good.
It's not good. It's not good at all. I mean, I really felt for him. And he was drinking Tailwind for the first half of it, and I think the second half he was just drinking mainly water and just drinking too much of it. So,
imagine he had a small zip bag, and I usually carry a couple of them, and I also it doesn't cost much to over prepare. The zip bag with salt tablets, and there are multiple brands that have caffeine, don't have caffeine. Again, caffeine strategy. Yeah. Over prepare, have 2 of them, because if you pull it out, you're on the bike 180k or you're in the race, it falls into abyss of Everest, or I don't know, you lose it, then what? Yeah. So you have to have a backup. And imagine that poor guy that had to recover through a hospitalization. Imagine he had a zip bag with just about 12 small pills. It would only add up 5 grams of extra weight. Yeah. So then, water always follows electrolytes. So the best example is you take a regular salt, which is this is what we have in our intracellular liquid. You put a grain of salt on the table, and then you put a drop next to it. The drop will get absorbed, right? Yeah. So the water follows electrolytes. With your sweat, you lose the electrolytes, so nothing holds your water inside. This is just the simplest explanation why you need to replenish electrolytes. Yeah. And then if you don't have water inside, you have your conduit for the neural signals to your muscle, and then just generally the way that you can cool your body down. So in Singapore or in Asia, generally evaporation is a very big problem. We have a high humidity level outside. So for us to cool ourselves down, we need to push a lot of energy to our lymphatic system to drive the water content through the body cells towards the skin to evaporate efficiently, and we'll lose a lot of water just because of that. Yeah. So replenishing, important.
And the one thing I picked up from there is drink to thirst. You hear about it a lot, but not loading up with water just because you feel yourself sweating. You should only really drink when your body regulates itself in that respect.
Yeah, when you really thirsty, especially on the run. On the bike, it's sometimes you kind of don't feel, because your apparent wind is higher. So your evaporation rate is higher on the bike. So on a 180k kind of Ironman leg, you want to force yourself to drink a little bit more because you don't feel thirsty, because you don't kind of perceive how much you perspire and how much you're sweaty. But the good rule of thumb that I follow is I just look at at my attire when I'm running.
If it's got salt on it,
then a couple of salt sticks, couple of tabs, and just whenever I want, I ask myself twice, mentally check in with my body system, do I need some more water? Do I have some more water inside? Yeah. There was this marathon runner, a prominent anecdote. It's not really anywhere logged, but the anecdote says that Abebe Bikila in 1970, he ran the Berlin Marathon barefoot. And was it Berlin or Paris? Some marathon in Europe, and he didn't drink, so he just ran it. So, and then sports drinks, come on, it's a big industry. If you go to Google Scholar and then you look for the Gatorade Institute keyword, you'll find how many different hydration specific papers, scientific papers are there with a huge bias to this commercial.
Yeah, there's a couple of things in that. So There's a coach in Australia called Andy DeBoy. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's one of the top sort of endurance, certainly ultra running coaches, and he's spoken a lot. I've heard a couple of podcasts that he's been on and things that he's written around you consuming salt in the middle of like a race is just not going to be able to, is not going to help. Your body should have enough salt to be able to regulate itself. And I don't have like the full detail around it, but we'll put a couple of links in the show notes. But there's also the book Endure by Alex Hutchinson. I don't know if you've read that at all. It's like the curious limits of human endurance or something. But one of the things he talks about in that, and I'm pretty sure it was Haile Gebrselassie when he did a record marathon time, he also didn't drink or very little, and he lost, I think it was something ridiculous, like 17% or 20% of his body weight, just purely in water loss.
Yeah, it's water content, yeah.
Water content, and so your body has the ability to lose that much water, but it's then, as long as it can maintain the right levels of minerals to be able, so that you don't.
Not really. So
Okay,
the science puts some dehydration stages. So there's this before you die out of dehydration, you're in delirium. Before delirium, I think you're like losing conscious on and off. And then before that, you kind of barely orientate yourself, so you become like a little bit light-minded. Yeah. So the easiest way for you to assess where you're at is, again, just like ask yourself, do I really want to, like twice, do I really want to drink? Do I really want to drink? That way you will consciously control the not going into kind of yellow territory. You don't want to go to the red territory, but just ask yourself, do I really want to drink? Do I really want to drink? And again, I'm not sure how many next say 10 years, how many of the listeners of this podcast would be like an Elias Kipchoge contenders, like they're all crazy, outrun this guy or something. But we're aspired amateur athletes in general, right? So we don't want to go crazy. So never go to the extreme, but ask yourself, like just ask, do I really want to drink? Do I really want to drink? Repeat it a couple of times. Every aid station is probably not in a marathon distance. Every second aid station is probably gulp, like a small cap. But you come up, the idea of the race morning protocol, the thing that I've mentioned is like you come prepared to the start of the race. So you come with your 3 hours before the run, you had your brekkie. 2 hours before the run, you load it up like as much as you possibly can on liquids. Then you go and find a place to dump all that, because there will be like all these potties, it'll be crowded. You need to have like a place where you will, pardon me, like weed out, right? So like, but you come at a good water level to the start of the race, and then you just top up, and you have that reserve. The buffer is big. Yeah. So you can mentally check in your thirst. Ask yourself. There's nothing more powerful than being cognizant about like where I am. Yeah. Don't go into yellow or like red. If you're feeling like light-minded or you're getting depressed, have a gulp. Like don't stop it. But don't definitely like. I wouldn't recommend, even on standard marathon distance, like even on the very 6 hour-ish beginner athlete. Do it every 2 aid stations, not every aid station, because you get used to it. Next time you see an aid station, you will slow down, you will have a gulp, then you don't want to run because you just had a gulp. So it's by the 32nd kilometer, it's like you still have 10K to go and you're already like drinking. It's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, they talk about in Alex Hutchinson, his book as well, talks about just swishing like a sugary drink around your mouth, but not actually consuming it. Is also and spit it out is another way to, I don't know whether like tricks the brain that you have taken on liquids, but it seems to be another method you can use. What are your thoughts around supplements then, around general minerals and supplements, whether it be multivitamins or firstly finding out what supplements you should or you could potentially be deficient of, and then how to think about consuming them and what time and whether it is. And I mean, it's such a big industry now. Like, is it worth it? Can you get it all from food?
That's I will just answer, like I'll just jump straight into the beetroot debate, if you don't mind.
The beetroot debate. Yeah, okay.
So the beetroot debate. Again, the same guy that is like, big shout out to Jeff Rothschild. They did a controlled study on the beetroots, and there is I guess like I'm quoting against the study. There is a limited evidence that suggests that there may be small but favorable effects of endurance training with nitrate supplementation. And like, long story short, you are able to develop your type 2, the fast twitch muscles. You're able to develop them faster and better, and therefore you have like a peak interval, like top end power for whenever you need to power through a mountain, if you're climbing like inside your ultra, or you need to overtake someone on a bike if you're doing an Ironman. So you will have a better top end power there. And they put some measures in that paper to it. So there is, again, like a debatable amount of small evidence about beetroot. I actually don't do beetroot myself. I will probably start just because, like, this is the very recent study. Jeff only published it like a couple of months ago. So now to the supplements, I personally, when I train with like 100K kind of weeks, when training for ultras, I definitely think about my joints. So I prefer the collagen peptides kind of like supplements. The brand that I do is called Geladrink. So they're manufactured in Czech Republic, and they're sold in like big cans, like half a kilo can, and you should take it for about like 30 days. So that helped me a lot when I was prepping for all ultras. I was taking it at the peak of the training before you kind of like start eating out, because just, I don't know, like it just feels better to me. There is a controlled study about collagen peptides and chondroprotectors. They are not on humans though. They measured, like, they actually went into, I think, the joints of dogs and horses, and they kind of like figured out that there is some, again, slight positive effect that they bring in. They didn't do that on humans per se, if I'm not wrong with my research, but it worked for me. And overall ultras, and I come on, it was not joke, like 130K weeks. It's a lot of running, especially in Singapore. Everything is not on trails, it's on tarmac.
Yeah.
With you, even if you have like a good heel drop of like 10 millimeters, it's like still a lot of impact. Yeah. So these are kind of supplements that I personally prefer to do. On recovery, people sometimes confuse compensation with recovery. This is the major amateur mistake. So when you're doing a training that is less than 2 hours long or something like that, you don't actually need any recovery. So if you're doing like a long wearing out protein type of like run or a cycle, for like everything that you do in cycling, actually you need to double up to what you do in running. So it's like, if you're running for 2 hours, then you have to have some recovery, but it's only 4 hours on the bicycle that then need the recovery. So people actually take compensation effects, which are psychological belief that you can afford this kind of like pizza or like beef, like steak, whatever. They substitute it to the real needs of recovery. Protein wise, during the recovery, I take protein powders just because I'm not a vegetarian. Like, I like my chicken breast and egg whites. Not at all like not at this point in life I'm considering veganism for many reasons. Maybe later, who knows? But the protein powders, there's a good one. New Zest, very tasty one.
Yeah.
I liked it. So I do the smoothies, like after long rides or something like that. Just do the protein smoothie in a blender with a banana, and off you go with yogurt. Fat-free yogurt already has a decent amount of protein content with the kind of carbohydrates in form of lactose. Throw in a banana or throw in apple just for the taste. There's no fiber if you blend it in the blender.
Why does it need to be low fat?
Just because we live in Singapore, like it's the amount of adipose tissue that we carry is not needed. Like, I mean, we basically have such a warm weather. Being very lean on fat is absolutely like comfortable. If I do like cross country skiing in Finland, I regret about it. Like, honestly, I really regret if I go like to Finland or to Sweden to do skiing, because you then need some fat. But here I try to just like to purge it as much as possible from my food. Visible fats, nutrition information labeling. Low fat is very controlled word in Singapore, so that really means low fat.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time in low fat, then they've just added in sugar though to be able to increase the flavour, the taste of it.
That is, you read that on the nutrition information panel. It's debatable, but sometimes some manufacturers do that. Yeah, I agree. But on the positive side, so getting back to the supplements, basically, so beetroot, good. I never did it myself. Will do the peptides, and it's only for long, really long, a lot of running, kind of like 100K weeks. I do that. And protein for eccentric exercises as a recovery.
And recovery is immediately, and so protein shakes after
protein
a big
shakes
session.
After eccentric. Yeah. So like for me, eccentric would be at this level of my endurance readiness, maybe like 2.5 hours run, or like 5 hours cycle. Other than that, it's just like normal. Don't do anything.
And so what about things like multivitamins, like if taking additional like vitamin B's, or like I take I did a test called DNA Fit, and it was able to give an indication of potential vitamins that I might be deficient of. And it's only directional. It's not like a blood test that can tell you haven't got
exactly
enough.
So we're getting back to the nutritional needs assessment thing. So go do the biochemical blood test. This is the best thing you can do. Figure out what's the actual deficiency level, whether it is there or not there. So DNA test is great. I mean, it's interesting. I like it. However, just the very old school blood test, like what is needed. On the multivitamins, vitamins can be, some of them could be toxic in excess, some of them cannot be toxic in excess. The good news is we live in Asia, so we have so many really, really great fruits available. Like, what is the best, like, let me ask you the same question that I ask in all of my workshops. What is the best source of vitamin C in your opinion?
I mean, people instantly think oranges just because but I know it's not. Apples probably, or is it something like papaya or something random like that, or pineapple?
No, this is the thing. So the best most loaded
tomatoes maybe.
The best loaded fruit, which is easily available around Singapore, everywhere around Asia. Guava. Take a look at how much there is. It's just like 300 micrograms, I think. It's just insane. It's like almost 2.5 times more than an orange, and at the same time, all very low fructose level and huge fiber content. Guava, like papaya, you mentioned, is great because it also carries
it's a lot of fiber.
A lot of fiber. Yeah, it's very water, like a lot of water content in it. So it's like it's less than guava. It's probably around what orange would give you, but it carries like a lot of satiation, and in comparison to and it's lower fructose compared to orange. All of that stuff is just like research. You can dig into it. You can ask like myself in Instagram or on Facebook. But like there is no need to take pills if you live in Asia. Just eat fruits. It's honestly unless your biochemical assessment of your nutritional needs shows that there is a certain deficiency. You won't believe me. The PhD, one of the PhDs that taught us the nutrition science course. She claimed that there is every like 6th Singaporean has a vitamin D deficiency. Because they take bus to MRT to the office tunnel to the office tower, and then they go for lunch. They open up an umbrella. And put suntan lotion like 50 SPF suntan lotion on. Not good, not inspiring. But this is the reality. By any chance, start with knowing what's your status quo. Do the biochemical, just blood test, basically, like a full-blown blood test will give you all the recommendations.
What about alcohol?
Oh!
Because I love a drink, and it's my nemesis. Like I have to have at least a drink.
Yeah. How did the Native Americans called it? Red Devil, right? Was it?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
So I think the answer is very simple. There are only 4 types of fuel that we humans can consume in our life. 4 types of fuel. Like the macronutrients, you call them micronutrients. So like they're only protein, carbohydrates, and lipids, the fats. Yeah. But there's a 4th type of fuel, which is alcohol, which we metabolize as a priority because it's toxic. It's a toxin. So whenever you eat and then you drink alcohol, your metabolization switches to processing alcohol first. So whoever tells you that to sober up, you need to go eat some junk food, don't listen to them because it's like complete BS. Alcohol is great. The stories about, I think they still do that. It's not really an anecdote. I think that those avalanche rescue dogs in Alps, they carry like a small barrel with whiskey or with vodka or with grog.
Really?
Yeah, the Saint Bernards, those dogs, that can actually save people by digging them from the avalanches. Yeah. They have like these collards, and there is some certain amount of like very high alcohol content stuff, if I'm not mistaken. It used to be like that, but maybe they're no longer doing that. It just is an immediate burst of energy. 7 calories per gram is no joke, right? It's almost like immediately available with so fuels that we've mentioned. Alcohol only needs about 1 liter of oxygen per gram to yield the 7 calories of energy. It's almost what a carbohydrate gets. Carbohydrate is 4 calories per gram at 1 liter. Fat is like 9, but you need 2 liters of oxygen. So it's very efficient. It's like 7 calories per gram, 1 liter of oxygen, but it has a side effect. You're basically drunk. So like, if there was a way to run a marathon drunk, I mean, I would be the first guy doing that.
Well, you're Russian. You'll be mainlining vodka. Yeah.
But like honestly, it's all about your status quo. I have I have a role that is customer facing, and I in my full-time job. So like nutrition definitely is an aspiration to be the full-time job, but full-time job is a full-time job. So the full-time job is customer facing. So having a wine is normal. I mean, it's part of our social life. And it takes a lot of effort to switch to like the solution. Some people like myself, if I'm in a session with a lot of customers, I prefer to just have like Coke Zero and put like a lime in it, so it looks like as if I'm drinking like a Coke, whiskey Coke or something like that. Do not overdo. Everything is great in moderation, but it is a very dense source of energy. It counts. So if you have like your estimated energy requirements planned for the week that we talked about, figure out how much is your drink. It's very easy math. Again, 7 grams is for a spirit, which is 100% alcohol. So like if you have 100 grams of wine, which is like half a glass, it's about like 100 calories plus. Instantly, right? So and plus there's some side effects to it, because your hunger will be at the same level, but your aspiration to take some snacks, to take some additional energy from the canapes and like the how we call them nibbles. Yeah. So that's kind of dangerous. So.
Yeah, and then also you have the like hangover effect of the next day, not wanting to get up and train.
I have a solution for that though. Okay. Like, the solution is to have a very sweet liquor, super sweet liquor, right before you want to end up the party.
Like a schnapps or something? Or
I do like a Grand Marnier or an old fashioned. Like this is a super loaded cocktail. Yeah. So you wake up, the sense of a hangover is because your glycogen stores are still depleted and you have a lot of toxins. So like if you basically eat that sugary drink before you go to bed, and then you can like force yourself to put your socks on and whatnot at 5 a.m. in the morning. It kind of works for me on business trips only. It's kind of exhausting. Yeah. But yeah, after like say if it's a big gathering in a firm, like maybe couple of wine glasses, and then Grand Marnier or the old fashioned, and then I still hit my 12K run in the morning. That's the solution.
No, I'm glad you said that, Arseny. We can still drink. I knew you were going to say that as a
Approved.
Russian as well.
Everything is good in moderation. Think about the side effects. Don't do it on the important race eves. Definitely get completely, like I get out of alcohol a month before the race.
Yeah.
But and also in between, mid-season, don't abuse it. It is a very dense energy source.
Yeah, very good. So yeah, I'd like to run through like a few quick fire questions then, just to sort of close up, Arseny.
Sure.
Just a few more like personal ones in background. So like, what's been what makes you emotional?
I think it's music. Decent, good movies. I recently, like, it's really weird, but I watched a very old movie with Tom Hanks called Big.
Yeah, I watched that on the plane recently.
It's so cool. It's just so like, and I'm a grown up. I'm like, just it just so yeah, I don't know. Like, if you didn't see that movie, please
Tom
go.
Hanks is a legend.
Yeah, he's a legend.
Most inspirational book.
That's a good question. So. I recently read, because I have a teenage daughter, I read an iGen, that's by Gene Twenge. That was very inspirational to understand like what the smartphones and the culture of always on, always online, peer pressure, whatnot, what it does on teenagers. So it really made me rethink the strategy of engaging. Like, I really want to do more and share about like health and endurance with younger generations, and I think there is this huge gap that we all, like, as adults, need to address. And it's just like,
what's the
it's
book called?
iGen, IGEN.
Yeah,
so it's a really and it's data-driven book, based on the longitude studies of polls that they send out to high schoolers in the US and whatnot. It's like absolutely fantastic, inspirational book. Another one was Douglas Rushkoff's, I guess, throwing rocks at Google buses. That was a very good book that I read about where we're all headed to as a society of pursuing like value bumping, always growth. We need to kind of like settle in, do more barter, chill, fix things instead of buying new things, and add value, contribute back into community, like what you're doing and like what I'm actually doing at this podcast. So I think like we need to stop at some point, otherwise the planet will not sustain us. And Matt Fitzgerald book, 80-20 running, endurance diet, many other things.
Yeah, cool. We'll add those links into the show notes. Any podcasts that you listen to or could recommend?
I'm a music guy. I don't, probably like audiobooks is the best I can comprehend. I'm not, unfortunately, not a podcast guy. So this is actually like my first experience on the podcast. I wish there were more topics to discuss. It really sounds fun.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any experience as a kind of like a podcast listener before.
You'll have to go and start by listening to Andre Bloomberg's then, if you haven't listened to that already on the Endurance Asia podcast. What are your favorite endurance tech apps? Are there any, you being a technology guy, like, are there any, obviously Food Buddy, but that is outside of your, that, like, I just follow crazy people on Strava. Like, big shout out to Alan Bradley, who is in our integrated riding team. Although he just moved to Dubai, he's still with us. So he managed the Race Across America solo. Oh, really?
Yeah, this year, and he's training right now. He's training for Trans-Siberian Red Bull. So just following him on Strava is good enough, and also like
Strava's amazing.
And then just being friends on like Facebook with with Andre, with Jag, like we ran the PYT together. Like he was ahead of me. He brought me like an hour and a half or like even more. Like he's
a phenomenal runner.
So these apps, like, I mean, I sunsetted my own Food Buddy app just because people have a bias to not do diligent tracking. I have a couple of paranoid acquaintances that track their calories and nutrition intakes, but 98% of people will tweak their diet to look great, which is not really the purpose of diet log, of like nutritional assessment. So it just doesn't work, scientifically proven, discard it. And
Okay.
I guess Strava. So Strava is just following right people on Strava is the most motivational.
I've just been introduced to Training Peaks actually, and I've got a plan on that. So that's it's an interesting product. Actually.
It's an interesting product. Yeah, I researched it. I think it's a very easy way for coaches to mentor lots of mentees remotely. So it's very dependent. What's the use case? So if you have like a coach that is able to just have a call with you once every now and then and give you like a plan in Excel, like that also works. So one of the really cool, Harry Jones, a good acquaintance of mine.
Bangkok, right?
Yeah, in
Chiang Mai, sorry.
He's now everywhere. He's now on the world tour, running everywhere he can. Hey, Harry. So I think he just basically does the Google spreadsheets as well. So like it's not like there is no particular thing. I mean.
Yeah, that's cool. Any kit that you would recommend for under $100? I know that you're sort of Ironman cyclist and do a bit of trail running as well. But what's
$100?
Like?
That's a good one.
I know it doesn't work very well when you've got with bike.
Actually, it's like a bit different category. But I think these socks. Yeah, Ingenie.
Cyclists love Ingenie socks.
No, running. Ingenie socks and Drymax, the combination. Actually, I always double layer when I do like an ultra distance. So Ingenie on the inside and Drymax on the outer side.
That's a good shout.
The other one under $100, almost at under $100 was my membership in Merle Talviste. What's her squad? Swimming squad. Swim Smooth Singapore. Big shout out to them. They are very good. So like if you really want to learn efficient swimming and you really want to have like a good group where you'll have a peer pressure in the right term, like not extreme, find Merle Talviste. She's an amazing athlete, ex very competitive athlete herself. So
can you share the link to that as well? Because I want to do an Ironman at some point. And I can barely save my life.
And then just under $100, I guess, like swim pads, fins. This is the best bang for the buck if you want to. And the how you call those heavy balls for the core?
Medicine balls.
Yeah. They're also like $20 or $30 each. So when you're doing your planks, then you switch it and do the twists of the medicine ball. These are kind of under $100 things. Yeah. But there are not too many in the cycling world, I understand.
Yeah, no, cycling is a rich man's sport. Arseny, mate, it's been a really good discussion. Like, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your philosophy around nutrition. How can people like get hold of you or be able to find out about you?
Awesome. Yeah. So just find me on Instagram. This is our main channel, instagram.com/foodbuddy. I am also responding to any coaching inquiries on Facebook, on our Facebook Food Buddy. If you want, I can arrange a workshop with your company, so you can gather like your running club. So my customers are like Facebook. I also am a people action trainer, PA trainer in Singapore. Allows me to talk to like any government organizations and to regional communities. So just reach out somehow. Tell me what you want to achieve. Tell me where your goals at, and like we'll figure out what could be just doable for you. So we'll find a way.
Excellent. I'm sure people have taken a lot from the discussion. They can also follow you on Strava as well. Watch you smashing the bike. It seems to be in a pretty impressive training block. So, mate, Arseny, thank you very much for joining the Endurance Asia podcast.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. That was cool.
The Endurance Asia podcast.
I always tell a truthful story if they ever ask. Stop the complaining, cause things ain't that bad.